Jean-François Lyotard, 1924 to 1998, was a French philosopher and sociologist best known for his influential work, The Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge, La Condition Postmodern, Rapport sur le savoir, published in 1979. This book is widely considered a foundational text for postmodern philosophy and cultural theory. It critiques the status of knowledge in advanced capitalist societies and explores the consequences of the postmodern era on science, philosophy, and society. Lyotard's The Postmodern Condition is a diagnosis of the state of knowledge production in late 20th century Western societies. It marks a shift away from grand narratives and universal theories toward a skepticism of meta-narratives and emphasizes the fragmented, localized, and diverse nature of knowledge. The book was originally commissioned as a report for the Quebec government to analyze the impact of new technologies, especially information technologies, on knowledge production and legitimation. Historical and intellectual context. The 1970s marked a period of deep social, economic, and cultural transformation. The optimism of modernist ideologies and scientific progress gave way to growing skepticism toward universalist claims, ideological certainty, and political grand projects such as Marxism or liberal humanism. The post-war period's faith in reason, science, and progress was increasingly questioned amid economic crises, social upheaval, and the rise of new technologies. Lyotard's text responds to this moment by interrogating the changing nature of knowledge in the context of the post-industrial society, where information technologies like computers and networks were revolutionizing how knowledge is produced, stored, and circulated. Core themes and arguments. 1. Definition of postmodernism. Lyotard defines postmodernism not as a style or aesthetic, but as an incredulity toward meta-narratives. Meta-narratives are the grand, overarching stories or theories, such as Marxism, Enlightenment rationality, or liberal democracy, that claim to provide universal, totalizing explanations for history, society, and knowledge. In contrast, postmodernism rejects these totalizing narratives as overly simplistic and oppressive, instead emphasizing plurality, difference, and local narratives. Knowledge no longer serves the grand projects of emancipation or progress, but exists in fragmented, specialized, and contextual forms. 2. The crisis of legitimation. A key concern in the postmodern condition is the question of legitimacy, how knowledge is justified and validated in society. Traditionally, knowledge was legitimized by its connection to overarching narratives. Science was justified by the idea of progress and universal truth, social sciences by historical materialism or positivism. Lyotard argues that in the postmodern condition, these grand narratives lose their power, and legitimacy must be found in other ways. The loss of faith in universal legitimation frameworks creates a crisis. How do we justify knowledge without recourse to totalizing stories? 3. The role of language games. Borrowing from Ludwig Wittgenstein's concept of language games, Lyotard suggests that knowledge is legitimated through various language games, different rules and protocols governing discourse in different fields or communities. Rather than one universal language game, we have many small, localized games, each with their own criteria of validity and meaning. This fragmentation is a defining feature of the postmodern condition. 4. Knowledge as a commodity. Lyotard also highlights the commodification of knowledge in late capitalist society. With the rise of technology and information industries, knowledge is increasingly produced, stored, and transmitted as information, often measured by its usefulness, efficiency, or economic value. Knowledge thus becomes a form of capital, subjected to the rules of the market and productivity, rather than purely a pursuit of truth or enlightenment. This instrumentalization changes the nature of knowledge production and research priorities. 5. Science and technology. The postmodern condition pays particular attention to the impact of science and technology. While science was once seen as a pure quest for objective knowledge, Lyotard points out that in the postmodern era, scientific research is driven by performativity criteria, that is, how well knowledge can be applied, programmed, or computed. The rise of computers and information technologies transforms knowledge into data that must be processed, stored, and transmitted efficiently. This technical and bureaucratic logic shapes scientific work and undermines traditional ideals of disinterested inquiry. Implications for philosophy and society. Lyotard's diagnosis challenges the modernist faith in reason, progress, and universalism. Instead, he advocates for a pluralistic and fragmented understanding of knowledge that acknowledges difference, heterogeneity, and local context. His critique has profound implications for philosophy, science, education, politics, and culture. Philosophy must give up its claim to universal grand theories and focus on localized, context-sensitive discourses. Science and education must recognize the multiplicity of knowledge forms and the role of power and economy in shaping research. Politics should move away from universalist ideologies and engage with diverse, sometimes conflicting, narratives and identities. Reception and influence. The postmodern condition became a landmark text in postmodern theory and influenced a broad range of fields, including philosophy, cultural studies, sociology, and political theory. It helped popularize the concept of postmodernity as a historical and cultural condition characterized by skepticism toward totalizing explanations. Lyotard's emphasis on the end of grand narratives resonated with contemporaneous critiques by thinkers like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, who also challenged modernist epistemologies and power structures. Critics of Lyotard argue that his rejection of grand narratives leads to relativism or political paralysis, as no shared basis remains for collective action or truth claims. Others view his work as an important wake-up call to the limits of Enlightenment thinking in a complex, pluralistic world. Key quotations. Simplifying to the extreme, I define postmodern as incredulity toward meta-narratives. Lyotard, The Postmodern Condition. Knowledge is and will be produced in the form of performative language games, not as the expression of universal truths. The great narratives are losing their credibility, and with them the grand illusions that legitimated knowledge and power. Conclusion. Jean-François Lyotard's The Postmodern Condition remains a pivotal work for understanding the challenges of knowledge in contemporary society. It captures the transition from modern to postmodern epistemologies by highlighting the crisis of universal narratives and the rise of fragmented, localized knowledge. The book encourages critical reflection on how knowledge is produced, legitimized, and used within technological and capitalist frameworks. More than 4 decades after its publication, Lyotard's analysis continues to provoke debate about truth, power, and the future of knowledge in an increasingly complex and digital world.